Hi, my name is Alex Whitney and this is Conspiracy 101, and today we're going to be looking into Paul is Dead. So, there are many variations of the musical conspiracy. This person is dead, this person is a twin, this person is etc, etc. And the Sir Paul McCartney conspiracy has been around for a very long time. It has lots of different variations, some of which we will discuss. If you don't know, Sir Paul McCartney, probably most famous for his band Wings, and he was also in a band called the Beatles as well, but that's kind of before my time. Where to start? This is a really tricky one because it's a broad, it has lots of different tendrils, this conspiracy, but it is all encompassing. There is just one conspiracy in that Paul died and was replaced. The different permutations of that is where all the different conspiracies come in, and the various hints that this is truth and not a conspiracy or was hidden by other people other than the band members themselves, is what comes into play and what makes this a really interesting conspiracy. So, where better to start than the font of all knowledge, and it is the font of all knowledge. I wholeheartedly agree with that statement that I made myself. With Wikipedia, which looks disgusting now, I have to admit, it doesn't look very good, but that happens. It's just one of those things. But I'll briefly read the Wikipedia, and then we'll move on, because the Wikipedia isn't great for the actual body of what we want to talk about, but it's very good for rebuttals. The anti-conspiracy conspiracy. Paul is Dead is an urban legend and conspiracy theory alleging that English musician Paul McCartney of The Beatles died on 9th of November 1966 and was secretly replaced by a lookalike. The rumour began circulating in 1967, gaining broad popularity in September 1969, following reports on American college campuses. According to the theory, or rumour, McCartney died in a car crash, and to spare the public from grief, the surviving Beatles replaced him with a McCartney lookalike, subsequently communicating this secret through subtle details on their albums. Proponents perceived clues among elements of Beatles songs and cover artwork. Clue hunting proved infectious, and by October 1969 had become an international phenomenon. Rumours declined after Life magazine published an interview with McCartney in November 1969. Declined, but it still continues. So, if we're not using Wikipedia, the font of all knowledge, where are we going to go? Well, obviously, we're going to go to the Beatles Bible. Not quite as popular as Jesus. The Paul is Dead myth. I think there's meant to be a photo there, but there isn't. The Paul is Dead myth began in 1969 and alleged that Paul McCartney died in 1966. The Beatles are said to have covered up the death despite inserting a series of clues into their songs and artwork. The story goes that at 5 a.m. on Wednesday the 9th of November 1966, McCartney stormed out of a session for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, got into his Austin Healey car and subsequently crashed and died. Somewhat improbably, McCartney was said to have been replaced by a lookalike called variously William Shears Campbell or William Shepherd. William Campbell allegedly became Billy Shears on Sgt. Pepper, while William Shepherd was supposedly the inspiration behind the continuing story of Bungalow Bill, actually an American named Richard Cook III. There's a lot of names in these conspiracies that I don't understand the references to. I'm sure Beatles fans might get the references to some of these names, but I don't. So, apologies. In fact, the crash never happened. Between 6th and 19th of November 1966, McCartney and his girlfriend Jane Asher were on holiday travelling through France and Kenya. However, a couple of relevant incidents did take place. On the 26th of December 1965, McCartney crashed his moped, resulting in a chipped tooth, seen in the video for Paperback Writer and Rain, and a scar on his top lip, which he hid by growing a moustache. Additionally, on the 7th of January 1967, McCartney's Mini Cooper was involved in an accident on the M1 motorway outside of London, as a result of which it was written off. However, the car was being driven by a Moroccan student named Mohammed Hadij, and McCartney was not present. Hadij was an assistant to London art gallery owner Robert Frazier. The pair turned up at McCartney's house on the evening of the 7th of January, and were later joined by Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Brian Jones, and antiques dealer Christopher Gibbs. The party decided to head to Jagger's home in Hertfordshire before moving on to the Redlands, Richard's Sussex mansion, and the scene of his later drugs bust. McCartney travelled with Jagger in the latter's Mini Cooper, while Hadij drove in McCartney's Mini. The two cars became separated during the journey. Hadij crashed McCartney's Mini and was hospitalised with injuries. The heavily customised car was highly recognisable, so rumours began circulating that McCartney had been killed in the accident. The following month, a paragraph appeared in the February 1967 edition of Beatles Book Monthly magazine, headed False Rumour. Stories about the Beatles were always flying around Fleet Street. The 7th of January was very icy with dangerous conditions on the M1 motorway linking London with the Midlands, and towards the end of the day a rumour swept London that Paul McCartney had been killed in a car crash on the M1. But, of course, there was absolutely no truth in it at all, as the Beatles press officer found out when he telephoned Paul's St. John's Wood home, and was answered by Paul himself, who had been at home all day, with his black Mini Cooper safely locked up in the garage. Although the magazine downplayed the incident and claimed the car was in McCartney's possession. Ooh, the conspiracy. It begins! The origins of the myth. Belief that Paul McCartney may have died in the mid-60s began in 1969. The first known print reference was in an article written by Tim Harper, which appeared in the 17th September edition of the Times-Delphic, the newspaper of Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. Harper later claimed that he wasn't the original source for any of the claims of this article. He said that he was writing for entertainment purposes only, and said that he got the information from a fellow student. D'Artagnan Brown. Mr. Brown is said to have gotten the story from a musician who had heard it from the Californian West Coast. It's all a bit, what do you call it in America? Telephone. We call it Chinese whispers, which I don't think you're allowed to call it anymore. And that he also read the story in an underground newspaper, probably on the deep web. The rumours gained momentum on the 12th of October 1969 after an on-air phone call to radio presenter Russ Gibb, a DJ on WKNR-FM in Michigan. The caller, identified only as Tom, claimed that McCartney was dead, and he instructed Gibb to play Revolution 9 backwards, where he repeated number 9 phrase was heard as "Turn me on, dead man." Listening to the show was Fred LeBeau, an arts reviewer for student newspaper The Michigan Daily. LeBeau used clues from Gibbs' program along with others he had invented himself. Discovered himself, included the name of William Campbell, the alleged replacement for McCartney. I made the guy up. It was originally going to be Glenn Campbell with 2 N's. And then I said, that's too close. Nobody'd believe that. So I made it up. William Campbell. The Michigan Daily published it on the 14th of October under the title McCartney Dead. New evidence brought to light. Although clearly intended as a joke, it had made an impact far wider than the writer and his editor expected. Shortly after, Russ Gibbs co-produced a 1-hour special called The Beatle Plot, giving the rumour greater prominence. By then, it was well on its way to becoming a national, then international, talking point, inspiring fans to pore over their albums for further clues. A British version of the rumour is believed to have existed prior to the American one, with fewer details. The sources are unknown, but the notion of McCartney dying in a road accident appeared to have originated there. Originated. That's how you pronounce that word. The Beatles' responses. I don't really want to get into the Beatles' responses. We'll get to that later. Dallas Scott, 20th of February, 2013. First of all, if there was any question about his death being real, and this a hoax did take place, they would have dug up the body and did DNA on it. Remember, we live in the 21st century and have numerous technology, ways and means. C. Boeing, in reply, Mr. Scott, you can't just go into cemeteries and start digging bodies up and performing DNA tests. They have certain protocol for that. And if it is true, do you think that the powers that be would just allow that? Beautiful correspondence, love it. Right, so that's roughly the detailings of it. At some point, the original Paul McCartney died and was replaced in some way. The next... Awkward silence, part 1. The next one is from turnmeondeadman.com, and goes into the detail. It goes into the Paul is dead rumor again. I think I'll change that to that one. That's better, yeah. And but this website has some really good pages on the albums and the clues, which we will go through, which I think is really interesting. Let's read through this. So we'll skip bits if it's the same kind of stuff we've already read. The Paul is dead rumour. Rumours of Paul McCartney's death began to circulate in '69, a time when strained relationships among the Beatles were becoming public knowledge. Written versions of the story first appeared in college newspapers, etc., etc. The disc jockey, cover photo of Abbey Road, the Beatles' most recent release at the time, represented a funeral procession, with John as the minister, Ringo as the undertaker, Paul as the corpse, and George as the grave digger. Other Beatles album covers also contain clues, the caller claimed. The few Beatles songs contained clues about Paul's death, including some that would be deciphered when records were played backwards. Gibb related the rumour of Paul's death on air, which brought a strong reaction from listeners, and the story spread rapidly after that. The rumour became so widespread that Life magazine sent a crew to Scotland to track Paul down and take photos of him. Paul had taken refuge from the Beatles' legal battles in his farm in Scotland, and he was not happy to be confronted by reporters. When the crew from Life magazine appeared on his farm, Paul became angry and doused the photographer with a bucket of water as he took pictures. The reporters quickly left, and Paul, realising the photos would cast him in a negative light, followed after them. In exchange for a film of his outburst, Paul agreed to let the Life crew do an interview. The resulting article, which went into some detail about the supposed clues to Paul's death, appeared as the cover story for the November 7th, 1969 issue. Paul is still with us. Is he? About the same time, a fan magazine appeared that reinforced many of the stranger elements of the Paul is dead rumour. A sloppy account rushed to newsstands to take advantage of the public fascination with the story. Paul McCartney dead. The Great Hoax went into some detail in presenting the story of Paul's death. The story was that Paul McCartney died in an accident. That Paul had picked up, this is different. Paul had picked up a female hitchhiker on his way to visit friends. The woman became so excited when she realised who she had picked her up, that she threw her arms around Paul and caused him to lose control of the car. Both Paul and his passenger were killed when the car swerved off the road and hit a stone fence. And here's where the story takes a turn for the ludicrous. Paul was decapitated in the accident, and the trauma to his head was so severe that even his dental records were useless in identifying the victim. Not wanting to lose potential record sales, record company executives suppressed the story of Paul's death and brought in a lookalike to replace him. For some reason, this is the part where you have to suspend disbelief. The surviving Beatles agreed to go along with this scheme, but they left clues on all their subsequent albums about Paul's death, and the imposter who took his place. Paul's stand-in was a man named William Campbell, who had won a Paul McCartney lookalike contest. With a little plastic surgery, William Campbell had taken Paul's place in photos of the group. The surgery had become successful except for a small scar above his lip, and as luck would have it, William Campbell could also sing and just happened to be a songwriter with an exceptional ear for pop melodies. Of course, Paul wasn't really dead, as he explained in a statement accompanying the Life magazine and several years later to Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live. But that still didn't stop fans from poring over Beatles albums for clues to Paul's untimely demise. Many of the supposed clues to Paul's death are simply vague references to death. Other clues are pictures of the Beatles that show Paul in a manner that is different from the other Beatles in some way. Spooky. Especially involving colours red, blood, or black, death. Most of the Paul is dead clues are simply the product of an obsessive search for significance, but a few are genuinely chilling. The Beatles all denied that they had perpetrated a hoax and insisted that none of the clues about Paul's supposed death had any significance whatsoever. According to Ringo, it's all a load of crap. That's a terrible Liverpudlian accent. Oh, let me try again. Thomas the Tank Engine. Fat Controller. No, I can't do a Liverpudlian accent, sorry. Fat Controller. Nah. Thomas the Tank Engine. Oh no, what's happening to Thomas? Oh no. It's all a load of crap. Nah. It's not working. But I will persist. When asked if he had intentionally placed any of the clues, John denied it in similar terms. No, that was bullshit. The whole thing was made up. Lennon remembers. And then it talks about the DJ, various newspapers that purport it. I was one of the first to put it all together. Of course you are. Actual rumours of Paul's death is nothing new. A version of Paul is dead rumour existed in the UK at least as early as 1967, when Paul had been involved in an accident in 1966 and sustained only minor injuries. Much like the rumours about Bob Dylan's death followed his motorcycle accident, Paul was a subject of the same sort of speculation. Just an aside, there are like changes in personality, aren't there, if you have an accident sometimes? If you have a certain brain injury. I know Gary Busey comes to mind when I think of that kind of stuff. If you have quite a bad brain injury, you can change the way you are, the way you act. Maybe some of these clues that we will see in the future are actually the band members realising that Paul has changed. Not necessarily dead, but just changed. Yes, the whole Paul is dead rumour was absurd, so why did it create such a stir? It may have something to do with the public's growing awareness that not all was well within the Beatles. It explained why Beatles had stopped touring, why their music and appearances had changed so dramatically in the late 60s, and why the Beatles seemed to be drifting apart. In his statement in Life magazine, that's quite different, that is, declared that he wanted to go on making good music. But the Beatles thing is over. It has been exploded by what we have done and partly by other people. Perhaps the anti-establishment sentiment of the time kept the rumour going. The rumour was initially told through alternative media, at a time when mistrust for the establishment was high among young people. When is it never high among young people? Okay, cool. And then came the internet. Ooh. Right, so which one should we do? Should we do Abbey Road first? Oh no, my internet died. No, it didn't. Yay! Paul is dead clues on Abbey Road. The only one of these I've looked through is the Sgt. Pepper's one, which seems to be the one that people point to the most. But let's do Abbey Road first and just have a look. So here's the cover for Abbey Road. Can we open that? Make it nice? Kind of. That is a terrible, blurry copy of Abbey Road, but I'm sure you are more than familiar with such a picture. Oops. Zoomed everything in. Right. Abbey Road, the last album the Beatles recorded together, was released in the fall of 1969. September 26th in the UK and October 1st in the US. Rumours that Paul McCartney had died in 1966 had been replaced by a look-alike had been in the air for many months before the release of Abbey Road, but the story had mainly just circulated on college campuses. People in the know claim that the Beatles had left clues about Paul's death and replacements on their albums. Abbey Road served to fuel these rumours, and fears Paul McCartney had died became focus. Yeah, we've talked about this already. Yep, Life magazine. But it's difficult to analyse specific detail that triggered Paul is dead hysteria. Abbey Road contributes several new clues to the story. The cover shows a photograph of the Beatles walking in step across the street from Abbey Road Studios. Resembles a funeral procession. Leading the procession in John is wearing white, symbolising the clergy, Ringo in black, the pallbearer or an undertaker, George dressed in work clothes as a grave digger, and Paul the corpse is out of step with the other Beatles Beatles leading with his right foot instead of his left. Although Paul's eyes are closed and he is barefoot, asserting that because people in many areas of the world are buried barefoot. Paul McCartney Dead, the great hoax, stated that this was a strong death symbol. Also, Paul is smoking a cigarette, also known as a coughing nail. He is holding the cigarette in his right hand, even though the real Paul McCartney was left-handed. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to have a bit of a drink. Oh, cranberry juice and gin, that's all you need. You don't even need to have lunch then. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry. Sometimes a little bit sick comes up and it comes out my nose. Oh no, my headset. We might need my doodad in a bit. So hopefully we'll be able to listen to some of the reversed stuff. Behind the Beatles on the left side of the street is a Volkswagen Beetle with a license plate reading 28IF, suggesting that Paul would have been 28 if he was still alive. Actually, Paul would have been 27 when Abbey Road was released. For those who thought that this was just too tantalising to let pass, Paul is Dead the Great Hoax explained, to the believer, 28 if does symbolically state Paul's age, since people, especially in the Near East where Paul learned mysticism, believed we are all 1 year old at birth, counting the 9 months of pregnancy. True, in this light, Paul would have been 28 if he lived. Emphasis in original. The first three letters of the license plate, LMW, has been interpreted as Linda McCartney Weeps. One problem with this interpretation, however, is that Paul is yet to meet Linda Eastman in '66, when Paul's fatal car accident supposedly occurred. A police van was parked on the opposite side of the street in the Abbey Road cover photo. Joel Glazier, author of Paul is Dead, Miss Him, is the fanzine Strawberry Fields Forever 51, asserted that the police who came to the scene of Paul's fatal accident in '66 were paid off to maintain secrecy. To Joel Glazer, the police van parked in the background is a reference to this. I don't know why it's gone a different size. Apologies. The back cover, which shows a young woman walking by a Walmart with an Abbey Road street sign, was also scrutinised for Paul is Dead clues, and the image on the back cover have given rise to some of the strangest clues. Embedded in the concrete are a set of tiles spelling out Beatles, and the S at the end of Beatles has a crack running through it. In The Walrus Was Paul, the great Beatle death clues of '69, Patterson suggests that this is an allusion to literary supernatural characters who assume any shapes desired. The shape appeared perfect at glance, but upon closer examination a slight deformity was evident. He cited the character of Geraldine from Christabel by Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Lamia by John Keats, easily the most literary and far-fetched of the Paul is Dead clues. Okay, there's more. To the left of the tile spelling out Beatles are 8 dots, which are connected with the numeral 3. So the back cover actually reads 3 Beatles. In 1970, Joel Glazer visited the wall where the photo was taken, and he counted 13 dots. His conclusion was that the Beatles had intentionally cropped the picture to reveal the number of the remaining Beatles. Also, he noted that to the right of the tiles is a very odd shadow that looks like a skull. Patterson reports that a number of conspiracy theorists thought that the woman walking by was Jane Asher, Paul's girlfriend at the time of his fatal accident. Conspiracy theorists believe that she may have been aware of Paul's death and replacement by a lookalike, so she must have been paid to keep quiet about the whole matter. Joel Glazer, however, asserted that the woman's image was included on the back cover because it contained a visual reference to Paul McCartney. He suggested that if you look close Look at the elbow of the woman in the photo from a distance. You can see Paul McCartney's profile with his nose and upper right corner of the picture and the woman's elbow forming a mouth. I don't think I'm seeing that. Those looking... Oh my god, how long is this? Oh, okay, it's not that long. It's just full of things. Full of comments. I looked at the sidebar. I was like, oh my gosh. Those looking for references to Paul's death listened closely to the lyrics of the songs on Abbey Road. As R. Gowdy Patterson points out, the tone of Come Together suggests an underlying tragedy was hidden beneath the lyrics, and the cryptic imagery of the song lends itself to imaginative interpretation. The opening line of the song, Here Come Old Flat Top, might refer to the injuries to the head Paul sustained in his fatal crash. He Wear No Shoe Shine may refer to a barefoot Paul in the cover photo for the LP. Got to be good looking because he's so hard to see may refer to the absence of the cute Beatle. Got to be the Joker, he just do what he please might refer to the Great Hoax, Paul's replacement by a lookalike, and the line 1 and 1 and 1 is 3 might mean that there are now 3 Beatles instead of 4. The medley that dominates side 2 of the LP offered plenty of fodder for conspiracy theorists as well. The interlocking set of 8 songs from You Never Give Me Your Money to The End may not have been thematically related, but the song fragments fit together well. This form was fairly... I give up. This is not evidence. Paul is live. Oh, live. Paul is live, not live. I love it. It's interesting to consider why Abbey Road was the album that triggered the Paul is dead hysteria. Perhaps the growing awareness that all was not well with the Beatles contributed to this phenomenon, but this does not completely explain why Paul is Dead story took on a life of its own at this particular time. In his book, Watch the Skies, a chronicle of flying saucer myth, Curtis Peebles suggests that the incident that took place in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 did not have much of an impact on mainstream culture until decades later because the mythology about UFOs was not yet in place to support the story. Only after key elements of UFO mythology was established did this story spread beyond a small group of conspiracy theorists. Similarly, the Paul is Dead mythology was not fully in place until 1969 when college students organised the clues into a narrative. I would point in particular to Fred LeBour, who created key elements of the story that would be later repeated as true, such as the identity of Paul's double, etc., etc. Okay, Abbey Road, not great. Let's go on to... the clues on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, which seems to be a bit more, not grounded, substantial, that's the word I'm looking for. In the Paul is Dead mythology, if Abbey Road is the funeral procession, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band is the burial. The Beatles had decided to stop touring and focus on experimenting with new sounds in the recording studio. It was Paul's idea that the Beatles immerse themselves in an alternate identity for the 1967 release. The name Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was a play on the verbose hippie-era band names, as Paul explained in the Beatles anthology. It was the start of the hippie times, and there was a jingly, jangly, happy aura around all around in America. I started thinking about what would be a really mad name to call a band. At the time, there were lots of groups with names like Laughing Joe and his Medicine Band, or Cole Tucker's Medicinal Brew and Compound. All that old western going around on wagon stuff, with long, rambling names. And so in the same way that I Am the Walrus, John would throw together Choking Smokers and Elementary Penguin, I threw those words together. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I took an idea back to the guys in London as we were trying to get away from ourselves, to get away from touring and into a more surreal thing. How about if we become an alter ego band, something like, say, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts? I've got a little bit of a song cooking with that title. The cover then shows the Beatles assuming this new identity and laying to rest their earlier image as the Fab Four. People looking for clues on Paul's death, however, interpreted the cover of Sgt. Pepper as representing Paul's burial and the end of the Beatles as we had known them. With its iconic cover featuring so many images from popular culture, Sgt. Pepper is rife with Paul is dead clues. The new psychedelic Beatles stand centre, while wax images of the younger Beatles look mournfully on their gravesite because the Beatles were no longer the same band. Looking at the older psychedelic Beatles, you'll notice a couple of odd things. While the rest of the Beatles are standing at an angle, Paul is facing the camera as though he was being supported by his bandmate standing at his sides. While the rest of the Beatles are holding brass band instruments, Paul's core anglaise is black, death, and wooden, coffin. A hand is over Paul's head, as though he was being blessed by a priest, before being interred. In Strawberry Fields Forever 51, Joel Glazer points out that the hand belongs to Stephen Crane, who wrote a short story called The Open Boat, based on his experience of surviving a shipwreck. He and 3 other men made it to a lifeboat, but one of the men drowned when the boat capsized. In his fictionalized version of the story, though, Billy, the only character referred to by name, is the strongest of the 4 men in the boat. He drowns when they try to swim to shore. Glazer also notes that Stephen Crane died in his 20s, and a number of other figures depicted on the cover died tragic deaths as well, including Jane Mansfield, who was decapitated in a car crash. Across the gravesite is a bass guitar orientated the way Paul, who was left-handed, would play it. The strings of the instrument are made of sticks, but there are only 3 sticks rather than 4, just as there would be only 3 Beatles without Paul. With a little imagination, you can see that the yellow hyacinths spell out Paul? ? Or, looked at another way, the flowers form the letter P. Okay. Joel Glazer points to the cover, perhaps the most imaginative interpretation of the image on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's. If you hold a mirror across the middle of the words Lonely Hearts, written across the centre of the bass drum, you will see IoniX He'd Die. When arranged as I-1-9 He Die, his image suggests that the date 11/9 or November 11th, 66, that Paul died is, as the diamond between the words he and die points directly at Paul. One problem with his interpretation is that British write dates as day, month, year rather than the American month, day, year, which would make this September the 11th rather than November the 11th. Does Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Band album cover predict 9/11? Now that is a conspiracy, meaning that one of the 4 is gone, and then He Die points to Paul isn't the missing Beatle. The doll at the right side of the picture, the cloth figure of Shirley Temple, wears a sweater that reads Welcome the Rolling Stones. Joel Glazer asserts that the Rolling Stones helped to cover up Paul's death, and the reference on the cover was a thank you from the Beatles. This message also suggests that without the Beatles, the Rolling Stones would have been the undisputed leading rock and roll band. A model of an Aston Martin, the type of car Paul supposedly driving at the time of his fatal accident, is leaned against the doll's leg. Okay. The interior of the car is red, symbolising Paul's bloody accident. Also, the cloth grandmother figure, whose lap the Shirley Temple doll is resting, is wearing a blood-stained glove. Ooh. The Japanese stone figure at the feet of the wax images of the younger Beatles has a line on its head, representing the head wounds that Paul sustained in his fatal accident. The 4-armed Indian doll at the front of the picture is Shiva, a symbol of both destruction and creation. The 4-armed Indian doll at the front... Oh, I've just read that bit. 2 of the doll's arms are raised, one pointing to a wax image of the younger Paul and the other pointing at Paul himself. The television set on the ground to the right of the Beatles is turned off, suggesting that the news of the tragedy had been suppressed. The album cover of Sgt. Pepper's band was okay. Innovative in several ways. It was one of the first to feature a gatefold sleeve which allowed the Beatles an especially large space for a band photo. Let's just have a look at this. It's not very good quality, is it? There's better quality out there. You got a little monkey. Where's Shiva? There's Shiva pointing. We got the weird doll with TV off. Very odd. Oh, it's done that thing again. Very, very odd. In the photo, Paul is wearing a patch with the letters OPD, interpreted as officially pronounced dead. In his article in Life magazine, John Neary reported that the phrase is equivalent of dead on arrival in British police jargon. Interesting. In the same Life magazine article, Paul stated, "It's all bloody stupid. I picked up OPD badge in Canada. It was a police badge. Perhaps it meant Ontario Police Department or something. This explanation didn't help to clarify anything, however, because there is no such thing as an OPD, or Ontario Police Department. Well, except in California, that is. The badge Paul was wearing actually reads OPP, which stands for Ontario Provisional Police. The angle of the photograph makes the P look like a D." Cool. Another distinguishing feature of the Sgt. Pepper was that it was the first album to have the song lyrics printed in full on the album cover. On the original LP, the song lyrics are printed on the back cover of the picture of the Beatles, over the picture of the Beatles. Unlike the rest of the Beatles, Paul has his back turned to the camera, the 3 black buttons on the back of his coat representing the mourning of the 3 other Beatles. Though John, Paul and George were all about the same height, Paul appears taller than the other Beatles, suggesting that he is ascending. Next to Paul's head are the words "Without You," from the song title "With You, Without You." Within You, Without You. Also, George appears to be pointing at the words "Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins," which was supposed to have been the time of Paul's fatal accident. George positioned his hand in this way not to point at the printed lyrics, but to make the letter L, the rehearsed letter in the word love, as the Beatles appear to be spelling out the word love with their hands. In addition to George pointing his finger in the shape of an L, John's hands are raised in a V, Ringo's clasps form an E, and the O is missing as Paul's hands are not visible. The lyrics themselves seem to be revealing information about Paul's death and replacement by a lookalike. The title song introduces Billy Shears, who then tells the audience, "With a little help from my friends, lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song, and I'll try not to sing out of key." Paul's replacement, William Campbell, but here referred to as Billy Shears, was still working on perfecting his singing voice. Several songs have references to the tragic accident. Good Morning opens with the line, "Nothing to do to save his life, call his wife in." One story of Paul's fatal accident was that he picked up a woman named Rita, and she became so excited when she realised she was in the car with Paul McCartney that she threw herself on him. As told in the song Lovely Rita, "I took her home, I nearly made it." In A Day in the Life, John sings ominously of a car crash. He blew his mind out in a car. He hadn't noticed that the lights had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. Nobody was really sure if he was from the House of Lords. Paul McCartney dead, the great hoax asserts. On the album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, one of the songs, A Day in the Life, has been interpreted as Paul's official death announcement. In the lyric of the song is the phrase he blew his mind out in the car. This is to support the theory that Paul did die in an automobile accident in November 1966, more precisely, but he was decapitated. Also, according to Joel Glazer, towards the end of Sgt. Pepper, the reprise, you can hear a voice shouting, "Paul is dead, yeah, really, really dead." This is very much open to suggestion, however, as Andrew Reeve, the voice shouting, "Paul McCartney is dead, everybody really, really dead." Another bit of audio that has been subject to scrutiny is the Sgt. Pepper in a Groove. The Beatles produced a few seconds of gibberish that would play indefinitely for those with turntables that did not shut off automatically. Here is it played forward, and here is it in reverse. So let's have a listen, people. Right, I'm going to mute myself, and then I'm going to press play. So. Okay, and now here is in reverse. I'm not so sure, that kind of sounds like gibberish. What's it meant to say? A variety of interpretations of this bit of audio have been put forth, some relevant to The Paul is Dead story, but most not. Long after the release of Sgt. Pepper, Paul McCartney was frustrated by all the rumours of secret messages, reported in Rolling Stone that he played Sgt. Pepper's Inner Groove backwards, and there it was, plain as anything. We'll fuck you like Superman, I thought. Jesus, what can you do? I honestly don't know what I just read there. December 8th, 1980. 12/08, 1980. 12 plus 8 plus 19 plus 80 equals 119. He die. Wow. Right, what are the other ones? Let's have a look. I might not go as deep in the other ones. I might just click on them. So let's go through them. TurnMeOnDeadman.com. I don't know what like servers it's using, but they're not very quick. There we go. Right. So this is clues on Magical Mystery Tour. That doesn't seem to be. I just want pictures, goddammit. Pictures of the Beatles. Oh yeah, that's just a sugar skull, isn't it? Like they're used. I've seen a lot in lots of different things. Upside down mirror supposed with his secret phone number. The phone number of a cover is supposed to be. It could be any of these. No telling what city. Maybe London. Information on Paul's death and person would take a trip to. Okay, that would be awesome. One of the best known Paul is Dead audio clues comes from the end of Strawberry Fields Forever. As the song is fading out for a second time, John apparently says, I buried Paul. Again, working on my Liverpudlian accent. It's coming there. That does sound like I buried Paul. Let's listen to it one more time. Right, let's hear the actual reason for it. The clue is more apparent when the recorded record is played at 45, using the terms of that. Okay, whatever. Yeah, I know what 45s are. As John's voice sounds as if it has been slowed down. Actually, John was saying cranberry sauce, which is much more apparent in the Take 7 and Edit piece version of the song, apparently on, which appeared on Anthology 2. So let's have a listen to that. Yeah, I guess. Paul explained that John would say something totally out of sync, like cranberry sauce. If you don't realise that John's apt to saying something like cranberry sauce when he feels like it, then you start to hear funny little words there. You think, aha. Another interesting clue on Magical Mystery Tour is the opening verse of Blue Jay Way. And Drew Reeve reports that the ghostly background vocalizations are as follows. There's a fog upon LA, and my friends have lost their way. We'll be over soon, they said. So Paul died, Paul is buried. I can hear that. Okay, so there's the I Am Walrus song, which apparently has more info, but he's done a post separately to that. And here it is. I Am the Walrus is on the Beatles' 1967 Magical Mystery Tour. Because of the strange imagery, I Am a Walrus has long been closely scrutinised by people looking for clues that Paul McCartney died in '66. It's creepy. It's just creepy, isn't it? It looks like something out of a horror movie. Oh. Okay. I'm not. It's just. Yeah, I'm not reading that. Right, let's go on to the next one. An interview with John, a bunch of stuff. Interesting interpretations of Walrus. Okay, I don't care. Alternative conspiracy theory. Ringo is dead. Paul is dead. Or is Ringo dead? Do you want to know that secret? Oh my gosh. We've stumbled upon the true conspiracy. Right. A lot of information there. Let's settle it down with some eye candy. Sometimes you go on a website and you realise this is the real deal. And I think now 45 minutes in, most people who aren't interested in the real conspiracies have gone. It's just you and me. Are you ready? Because this website's going to assault your eyes. So this is The Brainwashed Housewife. I swear this is about. There we go. Do I want to click on that? No, I don't think I want to. There we go. Sir Paul McCartney was Phil Ackrill, the second replacement Paul. The second replacement? How many replacements were there? If you can't see at least that there was an imposter from these two photos, then you might not be ready for a new hairdo. They're different people, apparently. This is a lot of evidence. I like this. So, like I said at the top of the show, the main Paul is dead theory is that he died in a car crash and was replaced. There are other theories out there, one that we'll get to right at the end, in which that he was a twin, in which there were 3 or 4 different replacements at different times, that they were around at the same time. Alright, so James Paul 68, Trevor Philip Ackrill 68, after Beatle Bill is being Piggy, George Harrison. Okay, so I think they're different people. Oh, he's saying shush. The symbol of shh, or be quiet, is a reference to the science program of MK Ultra. We've discussed MK Ultra on this show. The slaves are programmed to never speak of what they know. This is also a reference to keeping quiet. Oh, no, about the Illuminati secrets. When someone takes an oath to sell their soul, they also take an oath of silence. See? All these people. Illuminati, MK Ultra. MK Ultra, Illuminati, MK Ultra. Ooh, that's a close-up. So this is him 68 for Hey Jude. It's green eyes for Phil. And brown eyes again for a bit. James Paul McCartney back for Let It Be and The Rooftop. Yeah, that is kind of, I wouldn't say it's damning, but it is weird. And I appreciate the lights and stuff can really affect eye colour, and I think that's probably what's going on here, but it does look odd. Keep scrolling then. Ever notice someone was telling you that the fabricated band was all hung up? Okay, is this just the other person? Is that what he's meant to be? The following tale is pure and simple chaos magic. None of this is real. On this page you'll find a picture with 3 Paul McCartneys. The following is what you are intended to believe and fight tooth and nail in your view alone as being insightful. It is not possible to be correct about this topic. All forums are infiltrated and monitored. This blog is a compilation of what is out there in 2014. Here is a brief introduction as to what we are already involved in. James Paul McCartney. Paul circa 1960, Paul circa 1975. Okay. Does he have... Why has he got an extra lip? There were 3 at one time. James Paul, William Shepherd, and Phil. So, by far, Phil is the most talented replacement. Phil Ackerel in English Gematria equals 666. A Illuminati formula used to create Total Mind Control, Slave, by Fritz Springmeier and Siko... This is all over the place, this is, isn't it? The Trevor Philip Ackerel hairdo, scroll. Scroll that way? Ah! Ah! What's he doing out there? Is this... So he evolved into him. Again, look into Phil Ackerel's eyes. More info below. This photo shows clearly that the whole Paul is Dead was planned, set up before 66. Look into his eyes. He was zapped. See the little yellow and black book cover above. Before it was decided to introduce LSD and satanic fun into society, look for him below in the opening down the bus aisle shot at the very beginning of the Magical Mystery Tour. Okay. It's about the arched eyebrow and the bass guitar pick. Read on, be forewarned. It's a spell. I feel like this is like I'm going down a rabbit hole with this and it's just gonna... Measured with core angar lies. Oh, that's that weird instrument, isn't it? Old John and Paul 5'7". New John 6 foot and 5'11". My God, they had their legs stretched out. Does your hairdo by chance notice a hair height change? Okay. Oh, I see. That's what they were getting at the beginning. He's way taller. Okay. That's such a cool picture. I like it when 1960s pictures are like copied properly over to the internet and you can see them in their detail. Oh, now it's on to something different. Origins and techniques of monarch mind control. Using mirrors. Is that Paul? So guess which fabricated band was mind controlled from the start? This is a different conspiracy, this is, isn't it? The Beatles, the occult and masonry. I had become a craftsman and I could have continued being a craftsman. Lennon in the 1981 famous Playboy interview. Huh. The Beatles driver. What? Nothing is real. It's really not, but around here you get to make up your mind. Oh, what's going on? Many researchers conclude this is Bill Shepherd, aka Billy Shears, a play on sheep herder, possibly a typical Lennon creation, who went down to Kenya with Mal Evans, brainwashed hairdo manager, during the months before Paul McCartney reappeared. Might very well be. Okay. So this is also Paul Shepherd. His name was William Shepherd, and he was with the Canadian Province Corps, a division of the Canadian Military Police. And that's why he was wearing that badge. Okay, this is a good little breakdown. So this is Phil. This is Billy. Okay, so that's Phil Ackrell. That's William Shears. Shepherd. And that's Paul. These are all different people, apparently. I think. James Paul McCartney was a brilliant bassist and musician who was also under mind control from an early age, in our opinion. He magically plucked the bass with a pick. You can play bass with a pick if you want to. So that's Paul, and this is Billy. Billy, Paul, Paul, Billy, Billy, Paul, Paul, Billy, William, Paul, Billy. That's the same picture we looked at earlier. Now we're talking about his sons. EMI, a key member of Britain's military intelligence establishment, has been linked to mind control. Watch for 15 seconds. Okay. What's going on? I don't understand. Multiple pools in reality. So multiple. Oh look, there's 2 pools. 3 pools. 1, 2, 3. Oh, back to the eyes. Everyone had a facelift. Okay. Phil Ackerell before surgery, after surgery. False pool, real pool. Nice change of chin. So he had a different chin. Oh, John Lennon had a different chin. There he is, fake Paul. But he's right-handed. That would be really annoying, having to learn how to play left-handed. Not impossible, but annoying. Phil above playing right-handed. Hold the clippers. The mop of hair hanging above his left eye looks suspiciously like a wig. What? Is he wearing a wig? That's just, everything's mushed, isn't it? The eyes. Eye transplants. Can you get eye transplants? That's something we need to look into. The eyes. Look at the eyes. Okay, now they're looking at his son. Who is that? That's Vivian. I love this website. I love it so much. Is that the same weird look at it for 15 seconds? Is it going to change? So now they're talking about the Diplomats, which is a different band. Again, the eyes, Phil Ackrell. Him and his kids with his 70s do. I don't think that guy is Paul McCartney. Now they're talking about Satan. Accountancy? I don't need accountants. Let's read the top comment. This is from Move, an ELP drummer Bev Bevan's diary for the 3rd of the 4th, 809. I'm guessing that's 2009, not 1909. March 7th. My old friend Phil Ackroyd's birthday today. Phil was with me back in the mid-60s in Denny Lane and the Diplomats. We celebrated it at my local pub, restaurant, along with the old friends Carrots, Iomis, Gibbons, Trees, Hillies, Mayers and Ackroyds, of course. A good mixture of professions for the men there. The drummer, a comedian, a guitarist, a football manager, a bass guitarist, a craft centre owner and 2 accountants. So either Phil Ackroyd is not Paul McCartney, but Bev Bevan's accountant, or Paul McCartney does Bev Bevan's accountants. I wouldn't put that past Paul McCartney. I think he's more than capable of doing accounts. Okay, so what does the main man himself have to say? He has numerously said different things, but this is from the Echo from 2022, so relatively recently. The rumour that Paul McCartney died in 1967 has been around for decades. Those unaware, the legend goes that following a Beatles bust-up, Macca sped off in his car, and while distracted hadn't noticed some change in traffic lights. He was then reported by some accounts to have been decapitated in a car accident and replaced by a lookalike. The myth picked up traction around 1969 when on October 12, a caller at a Detroit radio station told disc jockey Russ Gibb about the rumour and the clues. People suggest it's true. Gibb and other callers then discussed the rumour on air for the next hour, and the myth then exploded in popularity. Toilet once owned by John Lennon goes on display in Liverpool. Need to get there and see it. The caller to Russ Gibb's show claimed that if Gibb were to play the Beatles' avant-garde sound collage, Revolution 9 backwards, they would hear a message, "Turn me on, dead man." This was supposedly a reference to McCartney's death. There were many clues alluding to Macca's death and other works by the Beatles. On the back of cover Sgt. Pepper, McCartney has his back to the camera, and George Harrison's thumb is pointing to the lyric, Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock, apparently the time that Paul met his maker. Also, on the sleeve of Sgt. Pepper, a mysterious hand is held over the head of McCartney, which many believe is an ancient death symbol of either the Greeks or the American Indians. It's one of them. I don't know which. You choose. Paul has taken a step from the public eye at this point, opting to spend more time with his wife Linda. However, years later, he would address the rumours. In 2019, he said, "I know all of the rumours because I was asked about them. There would literally be someone ringing up to ask, 'Are you dead?' I said, 'Well, no, I'm answering this phone call.' And the reply would be, 'Well, I can't be sure it's you.' So then you actually do get a bit paranoid about yourself." There we go. So even that doesn't like confirm it either way, does it? That's just Paul McCartney going, "Well, people say I'm dead. I'm not, but thinking about it, I might be. I really could be. I just don't know." Right. I'm not. I've already clicked. I've clicked it out. I was going to go back to Wikipedia, but you know what? There's no point. I think we've covered a lot so far. So let's go back. Let's do one more conspiracy. We're going back to the best, to the one, the only, Reformation.org. Top secret McCartney twins. Beatle Paul McCartney had a twin brother named Michael who was disappeared around 1956. Around 1962, he was resurrected using the name Mick McGear. I love you, Reformation.org. You are brilliant. The real Paul McCartney and the rest of the Fab Four were Titanic. I don't think that's a real word, but I love its use. After their last concert in Candlestick Park, San Francisco on August 29th, 1966. Most people would not credit Adolf Hitler as being one of the founders of rock and roll, but he did play a vital role in bringing the confirmed bachelor Jim McCartney and Mary Mohan together. In June 1940, Papal Irish Jim McCartney and Mary Mohan were forced to spend the night together during one of the Hitler's bombing raids in the Liverpool docks. Mary had a vital position as a midwife because Catholics believed that all unbaptized babies went to limbo. Beatles fans can thank Hitler for bringing the couple together. That's one way to look at it. Jim was 39 years old at the time and a confirmed bachelor. Coincidentally, the same night that the Third Reich showered Liverpool's busy harbour with bombs, forcing Jim and Mary to spend the night huddled together downstairs. It was love under duress, Mike McCartney told me in a 1984 interview in Liverpool. They were together ever after, even until Mum's sad passing. Ah. There is another Beatles connection to Nazi Germany through Volkswagen Beetle car. I wouldn't say that's the Beatles connection. The twins were born on June 18th, 1942, in Walton Hospital, Liverpool. The twins were born under Gemini zodiac sign. Fortune tellers cannot explain how two totally different personalities can have the same sign. Paul and Michael dressed alike. Twins, Paul and Michael, as infants, apparently. The father was allowed to visit them in was allowed to visit in hospital because Mary worked there as a nurse. He was appalled at the condition after all bloody and kicking and punching each other in the womb. Jim attributed the survival to papal miracle. Okay, yeah, twins are a miracle. Father McCartney and his 7-year-old twins. The McCartney twins, aged 9. I'm guessing this isn't really twins, this is brother and brother, isn't it? Paul McCartney at the Liverpool Institute in 1956. Mother Mary died of cancer in 1956, who was only 47. Twin brother Mike seemed to disappear about that time also because there are no more photos of him available. Mike McGear, aka Mike McCartney. The fake Paul McCartney and the fake... What? A substitute for missing Mike was found. He looked nothing like the real Mike. Paul McCartney look-alike did exist, but he was reserved for a later assignment. What? Before Mr. Lincoln became president, nobody cared about his family history. What? I feel like I only skipped one sentence, and now I don't know where I'm going. The Beatles and Pope Benedict XIII connection. The cover album of with the chopped up babies. Handicapped Beatles fan waiting to be healed. The Twin Queen presented Twin Beatle with a medal. Oh yeah. Yeah, but he thinks that the twins also are fake. The twins also are fake? Oh my god. The Queen was also a fake. Paul and Putin. Okay, the real President Putin was a highly intelligent and patriotic Russian. I want to revise this slightly. Who had tremendous responsibility of saving Christian civilization. He had no time to host or hobnob with an MI6 agent impersonating a dead Beatle. The man who met him in Moscow was a dead ringer for President Putin. Oh, okay, so that's not President Putin. Okay. If you ever he took a crash course in English, he does speak English really well, and if you hear him speak English, it's hilarious. He doesn't have a very nice accent. It's horribly high pitched and whiny, and quite effeminate. Not that that's a bad thing, but considering the personage that he portrays, it's quite funny. Okay. Fake Putin having fake tea with fake Paul and his wife. Is Heather Mills real, though? Is she real? So successful was the real President Putin in saving his country and the entire free world that he was assassinated in 2014 and the dead ringer replaced him. That makes a lot of sense. That makes sense. Beatles were Titanic in 1966. Yeah, perfect. Let's just end it on that. What a strange conspiracy. And I've not even looked at to scrape this like a sliver, like a millimetre off the surface of something that goes down for miles. This is a crazy conspiracy with lots and lots and lots of just ins and outs and variations on it. Like in the time we were looking at, there were a replacement for a death. There were 3 Beatles at one time, and there was also Beatle twins that were both replaced. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. I love it. Absolutely love it. What do you think? If you've made it this far and you've listened to the whole thing, what are your thoughts on the Beatles conspiracy? It's such a strange conspiracy. Is Paul dead? I don't know. I'll see you again next time. Bye.